The moment you realize you are not your thoughts would if I told you that the voice in your head, narrating your life, judging your choices, and creating your suffering isn't actually you. And you can prove this to yourself in the next 90 seconds. Your sense of being the thinker is an illusion your brain creates. Neuroscience reveals something shocking. Thoughts arise from unconscious neural activity, then appear in your consciousness as if you generated them intentionally. You don't create thoughts, you witness them emerging from processes you don't control. This isn't spiritual bypassing nonsense. This is hard science. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute, neuroscientist Sam Harris, and contemplative neuroscientists studying meditation have documented the precise moment when people realize the self-thought separation. Brain imaging shows this isn't philosophical, it's a shift in which neural networks you identify with. Your sense of self literally relocates in your brain's architecture. Buddhist psychology spoke of anatta, no self. Advaita Vedanta taught neti neti, not this, not that. Stoics practiced objective representation, seeing thoughts as mere impressions. They all discovered the same neurological truth. You are the awareness in which thoughts appear, not the thoughts themselves. This realization isn't just philosophically interesting, it's psychologically liberating. When you recognize you're not your thoughts, you stop being controlled by them. I'm about to expose 10 protocols that create the direct experiential recognition that thoughts are objects appearing in your awareness, not you. Each technique targets a different aspect of thought identification, systematically dismantling the illusion that you and your mental narrative are the same thing. Your thoughts have been running you. Time to recognize who's actually home. Part 1. The spontaneous arising recognition. You believe you consciously generate your thoughts. Try this right now. Decide what your next thought will be and when it will arrive. You can't. Thoughts simply appear. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet's experiments prove that neural activity initiates thoughts 300 to 500 milliseconds before conscious awareness. Your consciousness receives thoughts after they've already been generated. You're the audience, not the author. This is technique number 1 out of 10, the spontaneous arising recognition. For 10 minutes daily over 21 consecutive days, sit quietly and observe your thoughts as if watching clouds. Don't engage with content, just notice. Thoughts appear without your permission from nowhere. Try to stop all thinking for 30 seconds. Notice you cannot. Count how many thoughts arise without your conscious intention in 1 minute. Document this number daily. Your thoughts emerge from unconscious neural networks, the default mode network, memory systems, and association cortices then surface in consciousness. You experience them after they formed. You're building direct experiential evidence that thoughts happen to you, not from you. Studies on thought suppression show that trying not to think about something makes it appear more frequently. You don't control thought generation. Start observing spontaneous thought arising and watch the illusion of authorship dissolve as you recognize thoughts appear without your permission. Part 2. The observer-observed distinction. If you can watch your thoughts, who's doing the watching? This question reveals the fundamental split between awareness and mental content. Philosopher Thomas Metzinger's work on the phenomenal self model explains that your brain creates a sense of unified self, but this is a construct. Awareness itself is distinct from the contents. It's aware of, including the thought I am thinking. This is technique number 2 out of 10, the observer-observed distinction. Throughout your day for 30 consecutive days, whenever you notice a thought, immediately label it. There's a thought about work. There's a worry about money. There's a memory of yesterday. Use third-person language. There's none I'm having. Practice this labeling 50 times daily. Notice that the labeling awareness is separate from the labeled thought. Labeling creates distance between the awareness doing the labeling and the thought being labeled. This linguistic shift reflects an actual shift in identification from being the thought to being the space containing the thought. You're training explicit recognition of the observer-observed distinction. Mindfulness research shows that labeling thoughts reduces their emotional intensity by 50%. Distance from thoughts reduces their power. Start labeling thoughts in third person and watch identification with mental content weaken as you recognize yourself as the observer, not the observed. Part 3. The thought gap interval. Between thoughts, there are gaps, brief moments of pure awareness without mental content. These gaps reveal what you are when thinking stops. Neuroscientist Judson Brewer's research on meditation shows that practitioners learn to recognize and extend these gaps between thoughts. In gaps, there's consciousness without mental narrative, the pure awareness that's always present, but usually obscure. This is technique number 3 out of 10. The thought gap interval. Set for 15 minutes daily for 40 consecutive days, practicing gap awareness. When a thought ends and before the next begins, notice the brief space of silence. Don't try to extend it, just recognize it. Count gaps per session. Each gap is evidence of awareness existing independent of thought content. Document how gap recognition affects your sense of self. Thoughts are intermittent. Awareness is continuous. Gaps prove that awareness persists when thoughts cease. You're directly experiencing the substrate of consciousness. That's present whether thoughts are appearing or not. The gaps show what's always here. Brain imaging shows that in gaps, default mode network activity drops, the self-thinking system quiets, revealing awareness beneath thought. Start noticing thought gaps and watch your identity shift from transient mental content to the continuous awareness hosting all experience. Part 4. The emotion thought separation. You think thoughts cause emotions. Often the sequence is reversed. Physiological arousal occurs first. Then your brain generates thoughts to explain the feeling you're already experiencing. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio's somatic marker hypothesis and Lisa Feldman Barrett's theory of constructed emotion both demonstrate that bodily states precede and shape thoughts, not vice versa. Your narrative about why you feel something is often post hoc rationalization. This is technique number 4 out of 10. The emotion thought separation. When you experience strong emotion over 50 consecutive instances, immediately separate sensation from story. Step 1. Describe pure physical sensation for 30 seconds. Tightness in chest, shallow breathing, tension in jaw. Step 2. Notice the thoughts explaining the sensation. Because they disrespected me. Because I'm failing. Recognize that sensation came first. Thoughts came second. Emotions are bodily experiences. Thoughts are the stories about those experiences. Your brain narrates feelings to make sense of them, but the narrative isn't the cause. You're dissolving the illusion that thoughts create emotions by exposing the actual sequence. Studies show that separating physical sensation from cognitive interpretation reduces emotional intensity by 40%. The story amplifies the feeling. Start separating sensation from story and watch thoughts lose their apparent causal power as you recognize their commentary, not creators. Part 5. The perspective multiplicity exercise. Your thoughts present themselves as truth, but you can think contradictory thoughts about the same situation. Proving thoughts are perspectives, not facts. Cognitive psychologist Aaron Beck's work on cognitive therapy demonstrates that thoughts are interpretations, not realities. The same event can generate multiple thought interpretations, depending on cognitive schemas activated. No single thought is true. This is technique number 5 out of 10, the perspective multiplicity exercise. Choose one current situation you're thinking about negatively. Set a timer for 15 minutes. Generate 10 completely different interpretations of this situation: positive, neutral, absurd, philosophical, practical. Force creativity. For 60 consecutive days, practice this with one situation daily. Notice that all interpretations are just thoughts, none is the truth. If multiple contradictory thoughts can all feel true depending on which one you're believing, then truth isn't in the thoughts, it's in something beyond thought. You're demonstrating that thoughts are optional perspectives, not mandatory realities. This breaks identification with any single thought. Narrative. Research on reframing shows that generating alternative interpretations reduces negative affect and increases cognitive flexibility. Thoughts are tools, not truths. Start generating multiple perspectives deliberately and watch thoughts lose their authoritative grip as you recognize them as optional viewpoints. Part 6. The voluntary attention redirective. You were your thoughts. You couldn't redirect attention away from them, but you can. This ability proves separation between awareness and thought content. Neuroscientist Michael Posner's research on attention networks shows that voluntary attention control is a trainable skill mediated by frontal parietal networks. You can choose where awareness points, including away from thoughts toward sensory experience. This is technique number 6 out of 10, the voluntary attention redirect. When caught in thought loops, practice immediate attention redirection. The moment you notice you're lost in thought, shift attention completely to physical sensation. 5 things you can see, 4 you can hear, 3 you can touch, 2 you can smell, 1 you can taste. Complete this 5 for 3 to 1 sensory grounding 100 times over 45 days. If you can redirect attention from thoughts to sensations, you're not thoughts, you're the attention director. Thoughts can't redirect themselves. Something beyond thought exercises this control. You're proving through repeated experience that you have agency over awareness that thoughts lack. Studies on grounding techniques show they interrupt rumination. 80% of the time voluntary redirection proves you're not stuck in thoughts. Start redirecting attention voluntarily and watch the illusion dissolve. That you're trapped in thoughts, you're the awareness that moves freely. Part 7. The diffusion language protocol. The way you language thoughts determines whether you're identified with them or observing them. Small linguistic shifts create massive psychological distance. Psychologist Stephen Hayes' acceptance and commitment therapy uses cognitive diffusion techniques that change relationship to thoughts. Linguistic modifications physically alter how your brain processes thought content. This is technique number 7 out of 10, the diffusion language protocol. Transform how you relate to thoughts through language shifts. Instead of "I'm worthless," say "I'm having the thought that I'm worthless." Instead of "I can't do this," say "My mind is telling me I can't do this." Add "I notice" before mental content. I notice anxiety. I notice the story about failure. Practice these linguistic shifts for every distressing thought over 70 consecutive days. Language shapes cognition. How you frame thoughts affects whether you believe them. Diffusion language creates grammatical distance that reflects and reinforces psychological distance. You're using linguistic structure to make explicit that thoughts are objects you're relating to. Now research shows diffusion language reduces thought believability by 30 to 40%. Linguistic distance creates psychological distance. Start using diffusion language consistently and watch thoughts become obviously separate from you, as grammar makes the distinction explicit. Part 8. The meditation evidence building. Regular meditation doesn't just calm you, it provides repeated direct evidence of the gap between awareness and thought. Through thousands of discrete observations, neuroscientist Richard Davidson's research shows that long-term meditators show reduced activation in self-referential brain regions and increased activation in awareness networks. This isn't philosophical, it's measurable reorganization of identification patterns. This is technique number 8 out of 10, the meditation evidence building. Commit to 20 minutes daily meditation for 90 consecutive days minimum. Focus style. Every time a thought appears, simply note thinking and return attention to breath. Each noting is one discrete observation that you're not the thought, you're the noticer. Count notings per session. You're building an evidence database. 50 notings per session times 90 days equals 500 direct experiences of being separate from thoughts. Each meditation session provides dozens of micro-experiences of the awareness-thought distinction. Accumulated repetition makes this distinction increasingly obvious. You're not developing a concept. You're accumulating direct experiential data that proves the separation. Studies show meditation practitioners demonstrate increased meta-awareness, the capacity to observe mental states rather than be consumed by them. Start daily meditation practice and watch the recognition emerge naturally through accumulated evidence that you repeatedly observe thoughts rather than being them. Part 9. The question interruption pattern. When you're lost in thought, you can interrupt the pattern by asking, "Who's thinking this?" The question itself creates a perspective shift that reveals the separation. Philosopher Douglas Harding's Headless Way and Ramana Maharshi's Self-Inquiry both use questioning to disrupt identification. The question redirects attention from thought content to the awareness observing content. This is technique number 9 out of 10, the question interruption pattern. Whenever you notice problematic thinking, ask yourself, who is aware of this thought, or what is aware of thinking happening? Don't answer conceptually, investigate experientially for 30 seconds. Notice that the investigating awareness is prior to and distinct from the thought being investigated. Practice this inquiry 10 times daily for 55 consecutive days. The inquiry question creates a recursive loop that exposes the witness. You can't be what you're aware of. If you're aware of thinking, you're not the thought, you're the awareness of it. The question itself demonstrates what you're trying to realize. Self-inquiry practices across traditions use questioning to trigger direct recognition of awareness as distinct from mental content. Start asking who's aware whenever caught in thought and watch the questioner reveal itself as something beyond the question thoughts. Part 10. The identification experiment protocol. Here's something that will blow your mind. You can deliberately identify with thoughts, then deliberately disidentify, proving identification is voluntary, not fixed. Psychologist Michael Taft's work on awakening describes identification as a movable process. You're not stuck identifying as thoughts you're habitually choosing to, then forgetting you chose. This is technique number 10 out of 10, the Identification Experiment Protocol. Practice deliberate identification shifts for 80 consecutive days. Spend 5 minutes identified with thoughts. I am this anxious person. I am these worries. Notice how that feels. Then shift for 5 minutes to disidentified awareness. These are thoughts and sensations appearing. In awareness, notice the contrast. The ability to toggle proves neither is fixed. You're the awareness that can take either position. If you can consciously choose to identify or disidentify with thoughts, then your true nature is the chooser, the awareness that can occupy either position. Fixed identification is an accident of habit, not necessity. You're demonstrating that identification is voluntary. Studies on cognitive flexibility show that people who can shift perspectives show better emotional regulation. Flexibility proves non-identification. Start practicing deliberate identification shifts and watch your default identity transform. As you recognize you're the awareness that's always been choosing where to rest. Closing, these 10 protocols aren't philosophical concepts, they're experiential experiments that prove through direct observation that you are not your thoughts. You're not developing a belief, you're recognizing what's already true, but obscured by habit. Spontaneous arising recognition shows thoughts appear without permission. Observer-observed distinction reveals the watcher. Thought gap interval exposes continuous awareness. Emotion-thought separation dismantles causal assumptions. Perspective multiplicity exercise proves thoughts are optional viewpoints. Voluntary attention redirect demonstrates agency beyond thought. Diffusion language protocol creates linguistic distance. Meditation evidence building accumulates proof through repetition. Question interruption pattern reveals the investigator. Identification experiment protocol demonstrates voluntary positioning. Ancient contemplatives discovered this through dedicated practice. They called it awakening, enlightenment, or liberation. Modern neuroscience explains the mechanism shifts in which neural networks you identify with. Reduce default mode network activation, enhance meta-awareness. This recognition isn't a destination, it's the progressive dissolution of a misunderstanding. You were never your thoughts. You've been awareness all along. Mistakenly believing you were the mental content appearing in awareness. Your transformation doesn't start tomorrow or next week. It starts the moment you notice your next thought appearing without permission. It starts when you label your next thought in third person. It starts when you ask who's aware. During your next thought storm, the version of you who lives free from thought tyranny isn't someone you become. It's what you've always been beneath. The mistaken identification and awareness that witnesses all thoughts, feelings, and experiences without being any of them. Your future self is waiting for you to recognize you've been here all along. The unchanging awareness in which the entire thought show appears and disappears.